Hello, welcome to Capturing Christianity. I'm Cameron Bertuzzi. Today what we're doing is we're interviewing an actual, real Vatican exorcist. I've got Father Carlos Martins with me today. We're going to discuss some of his cases that he's worked on. We're going to ask him all sorts of questions and even have some audience interaction with him. But before we get into that, I actually want to introduce you or make you aware of a couple free resources that we have in the description of every video that we post. It's a 60-page ebook on the left here, The Rationality of Christian Theism, co-authored by myself and another Christian philosopher, Dr. Dustin Crummett. And then the resource on the right, again, both of these are free, completely free. Just got to click the link in the description. If you're sort of new to apologetics or you don't really have much familiarity with deep Christian thinking, then this is a sort of invaluable resource for you. All these different terms that get used, ontological, epistemological. There's a lot of different terms that get used in apologetics. And so this is a free resource that sort of defines all of these different terms and just helps you learn and sort of engage at a deeper level in this area. So I just wanted to make you aware of those two free resources that are in the description of every single video that we have here. With that, let's go ahead and introduce our guest for today. His name is Father Carlos Martins. As I mentioned, he is a Catholic priest and an exorcist. I've actually got his bio here. I'll just go ahead and read it for you. Father Carlos Martins, he's a leading exorcist of the Catholic Church. Throughout his 2 decades of ministry and service, he has helped set people free all over the world. Father Martins also leads Treasures of the Church, a ministry of evangelization of the Catholic Church, helping people experience God through encounters with relics. I'm very interested in, you're an exorcist, and that's sort of what you're, I guess, I don't know enough about you to say this is what you're most well known for. What would you say that you're most well known for? Is it exorcisms or is it your relics evangelism ministry?
By far, it would be the relics evangelism ministry. But one correction in your description of me, you describe me as a Vatican exorcist. There's no such thing as a Vatican exorcist.
Okay.
I work with the Vatican. I work with the Vatican in different capacities. So I'm known for that. I am also an exorcist. So what would the difference be? Exorcism is always permitted. It's always sanctioned, authorized at the local level, at the level of a local Catholic bishop. The Bishop of Rome is absolutely a bishop, and he can certainly authorize an exorcism. But Rome is kind of the head office of the church. It doesn't get involved in exorcism cases per se. They have their own exorcists. They have a department that deals with that. But he would be an exorcist for the Diocese of Rome, not for the Vatican. There really is no Vatican exorcist.
Would it be more appropriate to say that you were, say, a Vatican-trained exorcist? One of the other exorcists that I've had on the channel, Father Vincent Lampert, he said that he received some training in the Vatican.
That would also be incorrect. He received training in Rome.
Okay.
The Vatican itself is a specific entity. It doesn't do training of exorcists per se. The Diocese of Rome might. The Vatican may commission an entity, a diocese. It may sponsor a conference, but the Vatican itself doesn't do that training. Just like kind of the White House doesn't train the postmaster general to do his job, or even your local mailman. Although everything falls under kind of the purview of the president at some level, he doesn't get involved in the nitty-gritty.
Okay. Well, I actually really appreciate this level of nuance that we're sort of introducing at the beginning of this, and I'll actually on that basis update the title of the show. So that's really good, and I think what this kind of shows me is that your attention to detail is very precise, and so that's one thing that I already very much appreciate about you. So let's get into some of your background as we sort of start off this show today. What I'd like to do is discuss, I've heard you say on other shows, and I think you even mentioned it on your website. You may not, but I've heard you mention that you were an atheist in your early life. And so I'd like to just sort of put this question out there. How does an atheist become an exorcist?
Yeah, sure. Well, he needs a conversion, first of all. So I did. I converted when I was in college. I had just completed my sophomore year, my second year of undergraduate studies, and I went on a retreat. And on that retreat, I was invited to a retreat. On that retreat, I had an experience with the Eucharist, and I came out of that retreat a believer. Why would I even have gone to such a retreat? Because the group of students that were putting it on were very committed to their faith. They're very Catholic. They're very Christian. They were very just in love with Christ, and Christ was the center of their life. And that was powerfully attractive. They radiated a peace that was palpable and powerfully attractive. And it was a peace that I knew I didn't possess. And so I just found myself, as I got to know them more and we had classes together, I could see that they were very intelligent people. They were not stupid. And yet I was dumbfounded by their belief in God, because my thinking insofar as God's existence went, well, if God exists, why is there so much evil in the world? Why can the little girl down the street be kidnapped and murdered? If you were God, would you permit that in your world? I wouldn't. If God exists, why are there so many different religions in the world, each one contradicting the next? If you were God, would you permit different religions in the world? I wouldn't. And the third one, and this was by far the most significant, that the most entrenching of the atheism that I subscribed to, was the fact that, hey, if God exists, why does he hide himself? Why doesn't he just peel back the sky and reveal himself? Why do we have to take his existence on faith? If you were God, would you hide? I wouldn't. And so given these three states of affairs, given that the world is so constructed in this manner as to that these three states of affairs exist, I thought that was conclusive proof that God did not exist. An all-knowing, all-good, all-loving God his existence is incompatible with the existence of these three states of affairs.
So, yeah, continue. How did you sort of overcome those objections?
Right. So, living in atheism, I mean, so atheism was very much an intellectual conclusion. It was the conclusion of an intellectual process. I wasn't happy about it because I could recognize that we are wired by nature to want to live forever. We are wired for eternity, so to speak. And the threat of our lives suddenly ending, our existence coming to a close, is not a pleasant thought. And it gives us an anxiety. I mean, I was honest enough to recognize that. So what happened simultaneously with that is I encountered this small group of students, and there was a couple of professors that were very committed, deeply committed to their Christian faith. They wore it on their sleeves. There were no qualms from within them of defining themselves by it. I remember seeing, like on Ash Wednesday, they had ashes on their forehead like Catholics would do. And this was in the middle of a secular institution. But at the same time, they had more than just their witness. They had a profound peace that radiated from them. And the story that I like to tell, the anecdote I like to recount, is one morning I was having coffee with one of them in a coffee shop on campus. We were sitting at a round little table that are, the kind of round little table that is ubiquitous in a coffee shop. We were sitting across from each other, just having a chat, enjoying a cup of coffee. Someone came in and informed him that his car had been stolen. Now, it was around 11 a.m. in the morning or so. His car had been stolen that morning from the parking lot, and it had been driven around the back streets behind the campus and slammed into a tree. It was now hugging an oak tree. Right? So the last sentence he was told is, "Your car is garbage." And so he receives that news, and he turns and he faces me again, and he says, I guess it just wasn't God's will for me to have a car right now. And he could still enjoy the cup of coffee in front of him. And, our conversation from that point lasted probably another 45 minutes or so. It lasted a long time. I couldn't remember a single detail from that conversation 5 minutes after that point, 5 minutes after it happened, because I was just mesmerized by the fact that he had so much peace inside him that it didn't bother him that his car was destroyed. I mean, he could not care less. And so that kind of peace was something so different. I had never seen that in anybody else. I knew that I didn't have it, and I wanted it. I mean, he had a profoundly amazing art of living. He just lived well. He lived better than anybody else. And so that when the invitation to go on this retreat came about, then I really didn't know what a retreat was. I just knew that I was going to be hanging out with these guys. In fact, when they said the word retreat, what I understood was vacation. And so immediately my response was, yeah, sure, I'll bring the beer. And so it was, I went to this encounter, to this retreat house, and I knew it was a Eucharistic adoration retreat. I had no idea what that was. And when I got there, so there were 6 of us, and the 24 hours of the day were divided by 6 persons. And so that means 4 hours per each man. So that is a heavy load, to say the least. 4 hours of prayer in front of the Blessed Sacrament, in front of the Eucharist, which Catholics believe to be not a symbol of Christ, but Christ in his physicality. We take Christ at his literal words. And I might add, for that matter, every single Christian did until around the year 1500. So that was a universal and ubiquitous belief in the Christian church. To be a Christian for the first 1500 years of the church meant you believed in Christ's real presence in the Eucharist. And so at the same time, though, I'm looking I'm looking in my first adoration shift, my first shift in front of the Blessed Sacrament, in front of the Eucharist, and the Eucharist, for Catholics, we place the Eucharist in a fancy container called a monstrance, which displays the sacred host for adoration, for worship. We worship the host because the host is Christ himself. And so I'm looking at what appears to me to be a cracker. And in that moment, just the fact that I was in a place where I didn't belong hit me. I don't have the faith that these men do. I admire them, and I admire what they believe. I admire profoundly how they live, but I just don't share their faith. So I planned my escape. I just wanted out of there. And so this was in 1996, so it was before cell phones were in use. Cell phones were common. So I couldn't fake that I had a phone call, that there was some emergency that I had to tend to. I also, I just didn't feel right about telling them, hey, I feel sick. I gotta leave. I had too much respect for them and for their Christianity, which was already compelling to me. It was compelling not at the level of belief, but absolutely at the level of respect. I knew that these people believed something, found happiness within it, a happiness which was mysterious to me, which I was not convinced wasn't some delusion at this point. But what I could not deny was the effect it had in their lives. They didn't believe in a lie. They believed in a reality which to them was worth forging one's life around. And so I sat there and I thought, what can I do? I've signed up for 4 hours a day for 3 days. What on earth am I going to do? And so I couldn't bring myself to lie to them. And I did an act which is still astounding to me today. I got down on my knees and I said, God, I don't know if you exist or not. I don't believe you do. And I have to say that in that moment, as I'm saying these words, I feel like as I'm kneeling in front of the Eucharist, which to me in that moment appeared to be simply a cracker, having the appearance of a cracker. I felt that this was the equivalent of kneeling in front of a tree and talking to it. But nevertheless, I did that. I knelt in front of the Blessed Sacrament. And I said, God, I don't know if you exist or not. I don't believe you do. But if you do, please reveal yourself to me. And if you do, if you can give me the faith that I see in these guys, I will give you my life. And so what happened next is, well, I mean, just as important is what did not happen. I didn't see anything. I didn't hear anything. There was nothing extraordinary that happened. There was no mystical experience. And you know what? Looking back now, I thank God for that. Because if I did, then it perhaps would have been easy after the fact to question my mental state. It would have been easy to think that I had some kind of delusional experience because of the stress I was under, because of the situation of being embarrassed in front of these people. I had just come off a very heavy semester at school. It would have been easy to question my mental state. I've never had mental problems, thanks be to God, but it would have been easy to do that. But what did happen was the fact that that hour went by much more quickly than what I had anticipated. I was anticipating an agony, and that's not what happened. I was surprised how quickly it went by. 6 hours later, I had I had the first shift of that entire weekend. You know, as luck would have it, or as grace would have it, as Christians would say. 6 hours later, I had the start of my next shift, and again, nothing extraordinary happened, but I was surprised how quickly the hour went by. And there was definitely a sense of peace, a peace that began in that first shift, but it wasn't an overwhelming peace. It was just a peace that was strong enough to take away a kind of anxiety that I was experiencing, wondering, how am I going to kill an hour doing nothing but sitting here? During that second shift, that peace was much more palpable. It still was not overwhelming. But whereas if you can call the strength of the peace on the first shift to be a thread, now it was definitely a string or a rope. There was no desire at all to leave that chapel. But I simply chalked that up to my determination that, you know what, I signed up for these 3 days here, and I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this, and I'm not going to chicken out. And I'm going to respect the yes that I gave these people for this invitation, and I'm going to honor them by fulfilling my time here. Now, to be perfectly honest, Cameron, to be perfectly honest, one of the strong motivators, maybe even the strongest, was the fact that if I left, then I was giving more time in the chapel to these other guys, because they would have to, 24 hours in a day divided by 6 men is an easy number, right? It's 4.0. If you have to divide it now by 5, then it's a messier number, and it doesn't divide equally, and it gives them more work. So I thought, gosh, I'm not going to wish this on them. They got to spend more time with God in prayer. So at the end of that second shift, I left. And I was just so surprised at how fast it went by. By my third shift, which occurred in the middle of the night at 3 a.m., that was the shift where the wheels fell off the atheism wagon, so to speak. And again, I didn't see anything extraordinary. I didn't hear anything. There was nothing mystical to the senses that occurred. However, at a certain point, I knew that I was in front of Almighty God. I knew that I was in front of my Creator, who created me out of love, who had love for me, a profound love, and who had been waiting all of this time for this very moment. And he had engineered it to come about. I knew I was created in love, for love, and everything was different in that point. I mean, even the answers, the intellectual difficulties I had just melted away. It melted away because in that moment, God's plan, which surpasses the plan of man, came through. I knew I had never understood God. I needed God to reveal himself to me in order to understand him. And this is what he was doing now. And really, what cleared the way for God to do that was the offer that I made. Right? So, Lord, if you can give me what I see in these men that invited me here, if you can give me the peace they have, the faith they have, the tranquility that they have, I'll give you my life. Right? Because I knew that there was nothing better than that. That there was nothing that life could offer you that was more. And so in that moment, I received the gift of faith, and I've never doubted it. And I look back at that moment often, frequently. I think about it, and it's just as stunning and striking for me today. It's just as shocking as it was back when it happened. Because in that moment, my life drastically changed. So how does one go from that to becoming an exorcist? Well, subsequently, there was another retreat I was on. It was 7 years after that retreat. And, with that retreat it gave me faith. So life was different now. My identity was different. I finished my undergraduate studies. I went on and did graduate studies. And then I started a career in teaching. And it was 3 years into my career in teaching that I got a call to the priesthood. I was again on a retreat. And so I entered seminary, received my formation as a seminarian, and then was ordained and began ministry. And it was during, actually, the year prior to my being a priest, that I was called into my first exorcism. It was a house infestation. And at the time, I was ministering at a church staffed by 3 priests, and they served as exorcists for the diocese. They did the exorcism cases, but they worked with people. And there was just so many cases coming at them that when something like a house infestation would come by, like strange phenomena, harassment stuff happening in a home, one of them just turned to me one day and said, "Hey, deacon, batter up, go get rid of the devils. There's the holy water. There are the prayers. Make sure you're back by 4:00 because we're all going to dinner at 4:30. So that's really how it came back, how it came about. And so I went into that house, and I just kind of knew by instinct. Maybe it was through reading I had done, or maybe it was through conversations with these exorcists. I just don't know. And if it did come about this way, I certainly don't have a memory of it. But I knew that if the devil is there, if the devil is in a place, whether in a person, whether in a thing, in a location, he's there for a reason. That he just didn't all of a sudden set up shop there. He had to be given some kind of jurisdiction there, some kind of rights. And that my job as an exorcist was going to be to discover those rights and take them away. That is the MO. And that remains the MO today. And so I went into this house and I said an exorcism prayer and I blessed it. And that ended the phenomena for the family that was living there.
And then how did you become, how did you get sort of deeper and eventually become an exorcist yourself?
Right. So then, that progressed. I progressed from places to persons. And I have to say my training was all simply by apprenticing
Mm.
with other exorcists. I never went to a school. I have gone to schools, mostly as a presenter, though, rather than a student. I mean, I've never gone to a school as a student, a school of exorcism. Um, to be perfectly honest, I found them always of very limited use. Why? Because they give you theory, and theory only takes you so far when you're working with the devil. What you want is for somebody to teach you how to swim. You want to observe and then you imitate. And the kinds of questions the exorcist would ask, his approach, the way he tackles the task of finding out, hey, where are the wounds in this person by which the demon entered? You would need to see that happening. Just like you see, in order to learn how to dance, you've got to watch somebody dance. You've got to be on the dance floor, so to speak, and be doing those moves. You can't learn dancing from a book. And so in a classroom is always going to be a very limited use in learning exorcism. In fact, I've always found that its biggest use is for those who've already been an exorcist for a while. So they already have a sense, right? You already kind of know how to skate on the ice with the devil, but it's going to be imperfect, and you've got a bunch of questions. Now you go to school, and now you can tackle that theory part, right? So it's exorcism. The way I look at it is it's with a set of Aristotelian eyes, right? A set of eyes by which the philosopher Aristotle functioned. First you learn, then you learn to learn. And that is how the human animal assimilates information and develops a habit. Because to learn to be an exorcist is very much you're employing habits. You're forming good habits, and you're employing those habits within concrete cases of exorcism. So from the point of progressing from house blessings, house exorcisms to persons, then shortly after that, I was tasked for solemn exorcisms of cases of full possession.
So I've got a question, and this is sort of related to your background still. When you were an atheist, obviously you were a very skeptical person. How much of that skepticism transferred over when you became convinced that, Christianity is true, Catholicism is true? Some Catholics today, I would wager to say that a good number of them are skeptical of demonic possessions and demons in general. Did you carry any of that skepticism with you, or were you always open to their existence? Where were you at?
So the grace I received at my conversion was a grace that identified the truth of the Christian faith, that Jesus Christ is the Savior of the world, that he is God, that he is the second person of the Trinity, and he incarnated himself in order to give us communion with God the Father, with his Father, and that the love between them both is the Holy Spirit, which he freely gives. And that love, the Holy Spirit, is given to us at our baptism. And it's given to us initially at the point of belief, but it's given to us, he's given to us in fullness at our baptism. That was the grace I received. And everything that flows from that we are part of a communion of the saints, that Christ founded a church, and that church is the center of truth. That the church is not a human association, a collection of believers, but that the church is itself a mystical reality founded by Christ to transport people to heaven, so to speak. And it is the church itself that protects believers against Satan. And one's faith in Christ is incomplete unless one is a member of his church, the church he founded. Not the church Pastor Jones founded in 1983, but the church founded by Jesus Christ, the visible church, the structure that he inaugurated. So Skepticism. Every exorcist, if he's worth anything, is skeptical by nature. You have to be skeptical because exorcism itself, the state of being, well, exorcism is an illness. Right? It's a spiritual illness, but it can resemble very much mental illness. And frankly, some people in the world are just so strange, foolish, needy, that they at times will even fake demonic oppression in order to receive attention. So you have three states that can appear very similar, that can exhibit very similar symptoms. To actual demonic possession, mental illness, and fakery. And so it's the job of the exorcist to find out what is going on here. It's not just his job to identify whether the devil is here or not. We are pastors of souls. If someone has mental illness, I take it upon myself to help the person in that state. I'm not a physician. I'm not a psychologist or a psychiatrist. I can't treat the illness, but certainly I can help the person discover the illness and to receive a diagnosis from someone who is competent. And in so doing, I'm pastoring that soul. I'm giving care. I'm giving the care of Christ, the care of the church to that soul. And the same goes for somebody who is faking. I mean, will I be frustrated if I encounter somebody like that? Well, absolutely. But this person has his or her own illness. And if the person is helpable, I want to help the person coming out to come out of that state. So skepticism is our bread and butter. And we never take it as a given that someone who comes forward stating, I need the ministry of exorcism, that person is in fact possessed, right? We assume that the symptoms and the phenomena are rooted in natural causes. We make that as the default. But at the same time, and this is a mistake that I think many exorcists have made, it is entirely possible and in fact common for someone who is demonically possessed to also have mental illness. So these are not mutually exclusive states. So what you want to determine is the symptoms that are afflicting this person now, the symptoms that have brought the individual into your office and they're sitting here in front of you. What is the cause of those? And so that is the diagnosis is what occupies most of our time. And we have different tests for that. But certainly you never only do psychological testing. You never only do medical analysis, right? The priest, the exorcist, is not a referral service. If somebody comes to the church and is asking for prayer, well, the first thing we do is not send them away to go to some other professional. That would be a scandalous thing to do. Somebody's is coming to you for help. Well, you help them. So I always will pray with such a person. Now, that person may exhibit demonic symptoms immediately. If there is a demon there, when somebody is praying, exorcist or not, if somebody has the faith of Jesus Christ and is praying, that prayer is repulsive to the demon. It is demon kryptonite, if we can speak that way. It causes him pain, and so he's going to react. He may react he may react in a manner that is visible to me. He may not. He may react in a manner that is only visible or only sensed, if you will, by the victim in front of me seeking help. But there's going to be some kind of reaction. There may be no reaction. And if there's no reaction at this point, the probability is going to be very high and increasing by the second that the heart of the problem here is mental illness. Because when I pray, I am praying specifically against anything demonic. And if there's no reaction whatsoever, even internally to the person. So when I'm done praying, I will always ask, as I was praying, did you see anything, hear anything, feel anything? And I will specify that. Was there any pain in your hands, in your throat, in your stomach? Was there any agitation in you? Were there any memories that came up? Any dark, ugly images that came in your mind? Where I rested my hand on your head as I was praying, is there pain there? Did my hand feel extraordinarily heavy? I will make specifications like that, and I'll let them tell me what they experience. So that's the beginning of a diagnosis. Even if someone has a demon within them, you will employ psychology, you will employ medical staff, because again, they are not mutually exclusive, and there can be a condition in the state of somebody who is possessed that you need to be aware of, that if you're not aware of, that medically it can be a liability to them, it can wound them, if you're not aware of it, you're not helping them.
In my view, exorcists are not too unlike medical doctors in the sense of you look for symptoms, specific symptoms, and you'll make a diagnosis based on those symptoms. And you also will have them, as you say, you'll run different tests, and you'll encourage them to get psychiatric testing and like blood work done, and all sorts of things done to sort of rule out these natural causes. But I guess the question that I've got for you is, you say that you're a skeptic, and that you're not just, and that's every exorcist has got to be a skeptic in order to be a good exorcist. And right. So what are the indicators that you look for to come to a diagnosis of someone is either oppressed or possessed? What are the specific things that you look for, and then how do you make that determination as a skeptic?
Sure. So the thing to understand is, if a demon is present in somebody, they may not be possessed. There's different grades of demonic hold that people can get themselves in. But what we're talking about is within a body, within an individual, that there is now a spirit that is not their own, that is present alongside theirs. And in order to understand the dynamic here, we need to understand what a human being is. A human being is not a body and a soul. It's not a body with a soul within it. We are bodies who are souls. We are ensouled bodies, if you will. So it was never in God's plan for there to be a separation between the body and the soul that occurs at death. That was never part of God's plan. And so we are in integration. There is no point, there's no dividing line between where your body ends and your soul begins. Right? That would be a fake, artificial distinction. When you die, there is that separation, and it's definitive. We can see. We look at a dead body. This person is not here any longer. This is the shell of who they were. So when a spirit is present, he doesn't replace the soul of the person, but he can take over the animation of the body. And this is part of the mystery of God's creation. He created humans to be capable of possessing more than one spirit inside them, right? To be capable. This, in a sense, it's not surprising. Paul, in his epistles, identifies over and over again how we are members of Christ's body. We are limbs on the body of Christ. We're body parts on that body. And so what that means is Christ's spirit enters into us. And his spirit is exactly what we receive at baptism. We receive the same spirit of Christ. The spirit of God enters into us. That spirit is what makes us holy. That spirit is what generates within us the good actions that we're called to do. That spirit leads us, it guides us, it counsels us, it informs us, teaches us, and so forth. But it is possible for an evil spirit to enter inside us. It's possible. And even if he's not inside us, he can be around us. And so let's make another distinction so that we can get to a proper understanding, because that's what we're working towards. The devil is a fallen angel. So he was created as an angel, same with all of the demons. They are fallen angels. But an angel is a being, is a spirit that has no body. So an angel is a reality, an intellectual reality. It is a spirit. Each angel is a person, but it is a person without a body. And so there is no physical limitations upon them. What does this mean? Well, an angel doesn't travel. It has no need to travel. It doesn't have a body. Therefore, it's not limited by space and time. So an angel, any angel, your guardian angel, is just as present to you as he is to the planet Pluto, as he is to the farthest recess of the universe, to the bottom of the ocean, to the highest mountain. And he is present in all of those locations simultaneously, because all of them are equally available to him as any other. Right? So the first thing we need to do to understand the angelic reality, and by extension the demonic reality, is to get rid of the notion that angels travel, that they have physical, that they have a physicality to them, right? They don't. When we say a demon is inside somebody, he's not literally inside, because that would imply that he is contained within a body, right? That the body would somehow limit him, and that's not the case. What we mean by that is that the demon has somehow gained a legal jurisdiction to manipulate this body, to manipulate this person, to push his or her consciousness aside and begin inhabiting. Right? That's what we're saying. A demon is, angels were created with incredible intellects. Right? They are not limited by any physicality, so they don't learn the way that we learn. They learn, all the knowledge they have is gained through intuition. So we have to reason things out, right? We'll take two pieces of information, and if they are connected, we can deduce using syllogistic thinking, using reasoning, we can derive a conclusion. They don't have to engage in that process. Whatever they have, whatever information they possess, or whatever information that we normally would need to calculate, they have instantly at their disposal. So when we look at a clear blue sky in the summer, we see immediately the sky is blue. We don't have to reason that it's blue. It's immediate to us. Angels have all of their knowledge in this manner. So they don't have to for us to determine the 1,000th digit of pi, right? The relationship of a circle, of the diameter of a circle to its circumference, we have to calculate that. An angel knows that instantly, right? It's not even the fact that he calculates it. He doesn't have to calculate it. He knows it immediately. Right? This is the power of an angelic intellect. An angelic intellect has a perfect memory. So everything about you in your life, the angels witness. Anything that is observable, anything external, they know that. They know about you. They've spent your whole life studying you. So they have phenomenal information about you. And this is why they can exercise a temptation that's going to hit you right in between the eyes. Right? They're able to produce something that is maximally attractive to you based on your own makeup and your own composition. So all of this, angels function in this manner, demons function in this manner. When a demon is present in somebody, however, he has made himself subject at some level to the world of physicality. as long as he's present in this person, person X, my coming near person X and praying, he's going to feel it acutely, right? And this is the way in which God has so structured reality, that in choosing to inhabit this person, he is choosing to accept the limitations on his own being. He's giving up his defenses in order to gain that person. And so what comes near the person that is holy, he's going to feel it acutely, right? So knowing this, an exorcist tries to do that very thing. So initially in an interview, I will pray with the individual and I'll observe reactions. I'm looking for reactions. Again, I don't, they don't mean anything other than the person reported a reaction or I physically saw a reaction. They don't mean anything more than that. It doesn't mean to me, it doesn't, the conclusion cannot be made at this point that it was the devil or that it was mental illness per se or some other cause. I move into then testing in a manner that the person doesn't know, because there are three classical signs of demonic possession. Knowledge of unknown languages, so languages a person has never been taught. And so I don't mean one or two words or a few phrases. I mean perfect knowledge of that language, that they can function and speak in it using perfect grammar, perfect sentences, and they can respond to questions. In other words, formulate a thought based on that knowledge, based on a knowledge that is theirs. Secondly is knowledge of hidden and distant events, things that they couldn't possibly know. Like, for example, what is written word for word on the shopping list in your pocket, an extensive shopping list. Knowledge, if they're able to report back to you something you did at a certain time and place in your life, and no one was around to witness it, you've never told anyone else, but they have that knowledge. Well, they have knowledge of the occult, knowledge of what is hidden, right? That it surpasses the power of human nature to know that. And thirdly, it is a display of superhuman strength, a power that is simply beyond the capability of a human person. You know, a 120-pound woman cannot pick up and throw across the room a 300-pound man. Like that just doesn't happen. But if it does happen, now you have a display of the supernatural that has been shown, and you can't. Nothing in the natural provides an explanation for that. So you've got to leave the natural and enter into the supernatural to give the explanation. When I pray subsequently, I'm looking for these three things. Now, because somebody comes up to an exorcist, asking for help, I think I have the devil. I think the devil is after me. Can you help me get rid of him? So you can't, just as you can't accept that as fact, that what they're saying is true, neither the fact that they have the devil or necessarily that they even want to get rid of him. Right? You can't presume either one of those merely because somebody tells you. You have to now apply a testing that is beyond the human subject's perception. You have to be testing them without they know that they're being tested. And how do you do that? Well, one of the common tests that I've employed in the past, and I'm thinking about one case, the next podcast that I have coming out in my series, The Exorcist Files, it involves this case, and it was a possessed firefighter. And so what I did was I had when I interviewed him in my office, I had a glass of water, just like this, like I'm drinking out of now, and I put it on top of a shelf on one of my bookcases, one of the many bookcases that line my office. And, it simply looked like a simple glass of water that was left on a shelf, but it was holy water. The human person didn't know that. I knew that. And so when he came in, he sat down, and I just created simple conversation with him. And then, I asked him a question that necessitated a story to be told, so that he was going to be talking for a while. And as I did that, I said, keep talking. And I just went to my shelves and I started putting down stacks of books. And those books ranged on various topics, the spiritual topics, religious topics, theology, and so forth, but just strange and out of place things. For example, the 2002 Baltimore Orioles yearbook, a book on how to drywall your basement, and so forth, interspersed with these other titles. Why am I doing that? As I'm putting these down on the table in front of him, I'm controlling his eyes. And so he's looking at those titles. And I know that he's wondering, what in heaven's name is this priest doing? Why is he putting these books on the table? I'm controlling where he's looking. And so I just keep bringing several stacks, in the course of which I go to this glass on one of the shelves. Right? I know he can't see me. I have my back turned to him, but I know he has his back turned to me as well. And he's looking at what I just put down on the table. And I take my finger and I get the tiniest drop of water on my finger. And as I'm walking with the next stack towards the table, I fling it on his back. I don't fling it on his skin. I fling it on his clothing. So there's no human way that this individual can perceive what has just happened. And this particular individual shot up immediately in the air backwards, hissing like a cat. And I didn't have the individual any longer. Now it's the demon speaking. So what I did in that moment is I established knowledge of the occult, knowledge of the hidden. There is no way on a human level that he could know I just put holy water on him. There's no way. And there'll be other tests of this sort as well. I don't really like to go into those tests because those are the tools in our toolbox. And so if they become public, they cease being effective as tools. So, but that gives you an example of the kind of testing that we will do.
Have you ever had personal experience with someone knowing these ancient language or other languages, being fluent in them?
I have. I've never encountered them. So these three traits, these three signs of demonic possession, many times, perhaps most of the time, in fact, I think I'm comfortable in saying most of the time, they only manifest themselves in the midst of an actual exorcism. So now you need them, the church tells us, in order to perform a solemn exorcism. But I will already begin impromptu, informal exorcism prayers prior to beginning the ritual, if I need to use the ritual on somebody. And in the course of those prayers, in the course of a demon manifesting, I will exercise a testing in that moment. So I can speak different languages, several languages. But more important than even those languages is I've learned slang in those languages. So I will employ that slang. I'll ask a question using slang. I'll refer to something, some reality in a roundabout way, such that, gosh, even if the person somehow had some knowledge of those languages, that he or she couldn't figure it out and couldn't, formulate some kind of answer that appears to be a response. So if the demon can respond back with a perfect fluency and can be consistent in doing that, now we have a case of demonic possession. Now we've established that.
So I wanted to.
I'm so jealous of a friend of mine. He's Polish. He's an exorcist, but Polish is a language that, man, if you don't know it, you're not going to figure it out. To people in North and South America and Western Europe, Polish is not a language it's not a Romance language. So it is a Slavic language. So if you know Slavic, okay, you're in a different, but most people don't know Slavic. And so what he does is when he wants to interrogate the demon at some private level, and perhaps even at a level where the people in the room who are praying with him, he doesn't want them to know the nature of what he's asking. He will ask it in Polish, and the demon responds in Polish. He will compel the demon to respond in Polish.
Does every demon just know every human language, or how does that work?
They are not limited. They are not limited like you and I are, right? So they pick up a language just by the language being used. They have an intellect that is absolutely astounding. Astounding. They require no time to learn stuff like we do. Right? They exist outside of time. This is the hardest part for people to understand about the nature of demons. They are outside of space and time. So we are wired to understand all of reality within space and time. So you've got to negate what you take for granted in order to begin to have an understanding about their reality.
Well, I wanted to give you a chance to talk about this podcast that you're currently working on, The Exorcist Files. And you've got, I think, 2 episodes up so far, or really 3 if you count the introductory episode. And obviously this is going to change in the future as we're recording this live. There's going to be more episodes produced. But the 2 episodes that are available right now, they detail one case. But what I'd like to do is, if we can, while I have you on the show, can we jump forward a little bit? And this doesn't even have to be a case that you discuss on the podcast. But what is an example of, say, the most intense deliverance that you've been a part of?
Yeah, I get that question a lot. And, I think what you're looking for is for me to describe, and it's reasonable, it's logical that you would ask this. You want to know what are some of the most intense realities or phenomena that you've encountered during an exorcism, perhaps supernatural occurrences. Mm-hmm. So let me speak about the devil's use of that kind of stuff in order for you to get an understanding. When the devil employs different phenomena, let's call it scary phenomena, levitation of objects, levitation of the victim, a dramatic change in the physical temperature of the room, either an intense heat or a frigid cold where you can see your breath. And so the room would be normal room temperature, and in 3 minutes, you can see the breath coming out of your mouth. And in fact, both of those temperature fluctuations can be side by side. So half of the room can be frigid, half of the room can be boiling hot, and you're scratching your head trying to figure out how it can be that these 2 contradictory realities are happening in open air in one room, right? But it just does. The devil employs all of these things, and the phenomena I've mentioned, but other phenomena, in order to aggrandize himself, in order to put fear in the heart of the exorcist, in order to put fear in the people who are in the room, who are praying, who are acting as intercessors for the exorcist. People he's got in the room ready to physically assist him, who are maybe holding down the victim in the state of possession in order to keep the exorcist from being punched, hit, and so forth. But those signs, those phenomena, when they cease having their effect, the devil doesn't employ them any longer. So let me give you an example. So Cameron, if you were brought into an exorcism and you see a chair in the corner of the room suddenly pick itself off the floor and it starts hovering 3 feet off the floor in the room, that might get the hair on the back of your neck up if you see that, right? Clearly nobody's picked it up. The second time it happens, you might have the same effect. By the 32nd time, I guarantee you won't. By the 132nd time, you're not even going to put down the cup of coffee that you're holding. It loses its effect. Right? The parlor trick has lost its sexiness, if you will. It doesn't produce the intended effect any longer. So as you work in this more and more, those kinds of signs happen less and less, because the devil is not getting the effect that he wants, and so he doesn't waste his energy in trying to produce them. He takes his energy and he diverts it to trying to put up a resistance to the prayers of the exorcist and of his team. So your question was, what are some of the most sensational, I forgot how you put it, most sensational things? Intense. Truthfully, it's not the physical phenomena that you can see or perceive with your senses. It's the way by which he's ensnared people, the trickery that has been used, and the way in which he has solidified himself in the victim by altering their thinking and their beliefs. That thinking that I will never be free, and making them not want to be free, because he's put a threat in there. Like, if you leave, if you make me leave, if this exorcist works, if this exorcism works and I leave, I'm going to go into your kids. Right? So he's modified their thinking, their desire of wanting him out of them through a threat. And so my job as an exorcist is futile as long as the victim doesn't want him to go out. So that's also one of the areas you're looking for, right? Have there been threats made? Tell me those threats. Tell me them honestly, because I can't help you, and I can't undo the effects of the liar and his work if I don't know the lies that he's told you. You just have to put more trust in me than you do in the demon.
So part of my...
That's easier said than done. Because the devil is a master manipulator.
Part of my interest in this topic as a Christian apologist is due to the fact that I see a lot of overlap between the miraculous and demonic activity, in the sense of, if these stories are true, at least some of them are true, this provides pretty good evidence for the Christian story. Depends on, of course, which case you're talking about and which case in question. But I wanted to kind of get your thoughts on this. Do you think that exorcisms, the demonic, can this be used in one sense as a tool for evangelism?
Well, certainly I think it can, and that's why I did this podcast, that I wanted it to start a dialogue about this area. And why did I want to do that? I discovered the results of two surveys that I found utterly fascinating. So Pew did a survey, and they found that in a 5-year period, that the demographic of 18 to 29-year-olds, that in that 5-year period, that the number of those individuals that left organized religion and embraced nothingness, right? That became completely irreligious. In that 5-year period, it increased by 1/3, which is a staggering number. Yet at the same time, in a separate survey, it was discovered that in the same demographic, the same age segment, 18 to 29-year-olds, 63% of them believe it is possible to become demonically possessed. So, and that is a figure higher than in any other age bracket. So in this demographic of 18 to 29-year-olds that are increasingly leaving organized religion and abandoning their faith in religion, something is occurring within their lives that is making them conclude that the devil is real. And not just the devil, but demonic possession. And so I thought, I have got to reach out into that area. And that was something that I do work closely with the Holy See. How the project of the podcast came about was they were approached by the producers that have produced the podcast. It didn't start out to be a podcast per se. It just, hey, we want to do something on modern day encounters with evil and modern day encounters with the miraculous. And so they were given my name because Martins does both. So I was contacted, and in over the past 3 years, we strategized as to how to make this happen. And we settled on a podcast as the first instance. It's not going to be the only thing, but it's the first thing. Because in the pandemic, people turned to podcasting in a way like they've never had before. That's one. Two, in the age segment that I particularly wanted to reach out to, young people, podcasting is a media, it's a platform that they're very comfortable with. They can find a podcast within seconds. So it just became a way to make things very accessible for people.
Sorry, I didn't know if you had other thoughts, so you were going to continue. I wasn't sure, so I just wanted to kind of let you continue if you were going to. Let's do this. So we've got about another 20 minutes or so, a little bit less than 20 minutes left of the program. But I want to ask you one last question, and then we'll turn to some Q&A with the audience. So my question is, again, as a Christian apologist, this is the main thing that we do on Capturing Christianity is apologetics for atheism. So we interact a lot with atheist arguments, the arguments that you mentioned earlier from the problem of evil, divine hiddenness, and those sorts of arguments that you hear from atheists. And so the question is basically this. We have a lot of atheists that are watching this show, a lot of atheists that interact with our work. What would you say as an exorcist to someone who is skeptical, an atheist or a skeptic? What would you say to them to convince them that all of this is real and that they need to turn and embrace Christ?
Well, so I certainly wouldn't start first of all with talking about the devil. I think the devil would be a very bad place to begin a Christian apologetic. We begin with Christ. And, what I would say to the atheist is make an offer to God. Reach out to God. My discovering of Christianity was not an intellectual enterprise because my intellect, given the state that I was in, was incapacitated to go any further. It just was grounded. What I did was I reached out to the God I didn't believe in, and I said, if you exist, please reveal yourself to me. But if you do, I will give you my life. In other words, I wasn't looking for entertainment. I wasn't looking to be tantalized at some level. I was looking for my life to be new. I wanted the joy and the happiness that I saw in others. That made the entire difference in that encounter that I had with God on that retreat. That's what cleared the way for him to reveal himself to me. That I wasn't seeking for just another thing in my life. I was looking for the thing that would define my life. So what I would say is, continue your intellectual pursuits, continue grappling with the intellectual questions that accompany faith. But you know what? Most people, the vast majority, don't come to God through intellectual pursuits. They come through a relationship. And that only makes sense because God at heart is a relationship. He is a community of persons that are in relationship with one another. So talk to God. Ask him to reveal himself to you. Make him an offer if he does. With regard to the devil, I think what has to be kept in mind is the fact that for 2,000 years, the Christian church, and I'm going to say specifically the Catholic Church, they are seen as the authorities in the area of exorcism. The devil doesn't just appear to Christians. He doesn't just manifest himself in those who believe in Jesus, but he afflicts humanity. And all religions bring their people to Catholic priests for exorcism. They don't only do that. And it isn't the case that only a Catholic priest can get rid of the devil. But even among Christian denominations, Catholics are seen as the authority. The devil responds to the priesthood and to the prayers of the priest. And I remember one time, when I was working as an exorcist at that time, and I had been for maybe 2 years or so. And there was a pastor of a Lutheran church who contacted me and asked if he could send one of his parishioners, a member of his congregation, to me because he was certain that this person was demonically possessed. And I said, you are most welcome to do so, but when the person comes, I want you to come as well. I don't know that individual, you do, and I'd like to have you just in the room. And that's kind of standard that I do. I always want somebody either from the family or if it's a pastor that is recommending the person, I want that pastor in the room as well, because he's on hand to fill me in on things that I might need filling in on. And so as I was beginning to pray, I put on an alb, which is a white garment symbolizing baptism that we do, and I put on a cincture, which is a rope by which we tie that alb, and I'm putting on a stole, which is a garment. I have one here in front of me, just a purple or white, what have you, but in exorcism we use the purple side that you put around your neck. It symbolizes the authority of Christ's priesthood. And I could tell in looking at his face that he thought that this was a bit much. Like, why in heaven's name do you have to do this? Doesn't the prayer itself just suffice? And so I just continued doing what I was doing. And then as I was finishing dressing, the demon blurted out, "Do you think any of that is going to help you?" And I said, "Be silent, demon." And he was silent. And the pastor chimed in and he said, "I have said that to him so many times, and he has never obeyed." And so he himself in that moment was struck with something, that there's a power in the priesthood against the demonic. 2 years later, he joined the Catholic Church.
Wow. Okay, I said that was my last question, but I did want to kind of bring in your relic ministry as well, and just ask: have you incorporated the two at all in your work as an exorcist? Do you bring relics with you along with you to these deliverances?
Always. So the three questions I will ask a demon when a demon finally manifests, when I'm certain of possession, is: what is your name? For what were you created? Why did God create you? Who is your nemesis in heaven? Who is in heaven whom you particularly hate? Now, the demons never want to answer those questions, so it will take work, it will take prayer, it'll take combating to get that information out. But when I have those pieces of information, I have a lot, right? So I can address him by his name. If I know for what purpose he was created, that gives me knowledge as to his makeup. So he rejected that job by the Lord. He is constantly rejecting his duty. So I'm going to look for a saint who fulfills that duty. And who's your nemesis in heaven? Well, he's telling me which saint he particularly despises and hates. And so I will immediately obtain a relic of that saint. I'll go fetch it from my office. If I don't have it, then I will immediately try to obtain it because they are visceral against them. They produce a visceral, painful reaction.
Is it similar to the reaction that you gave about the holy water? Is it something similar along those lines?
Absolutely, but it's even more. It's deeper because in terms of the level of holiness, a relic is just much more holy than holy water. Why? A holy water is what we in the church we would call a sacramental. It's an object that has become holy through the action of the church. A relic has not become holy in that manner. It is holy simply by being attached to a saint who is a member of the body of Christ. So we're talking about two different realities, and one is higher than the other.
And so,
so
that's
relic,
why it's more intense.
That's why it's more intense. That's right. That's right. You will always get farther with a relic than with a sacramental. That is my experience. And these kinds of things I do talk about in the podcast, the Exorcist Files, which your viewers and listeners can obtain more information at exorcistfiles.tv. The first season is 14 episodes. 2 of them have been released. The other ministry that you mentioned, for which I'm known, is a ministry called Treasures of the Church, which is a Vatican ministry of relics of the saints. I travel the world teaching on them and bringing a very large Vatican exhibit and to give people an encounter with God through the sacred remains of his saints.
So I've got both of those ministries linked in the description of this video for anyone who would like to check those out. So before we get into Q&A, how much time do you have left with us? We did plan to do 90 minutes, and if you have a 90-minute cutoff, totally fine. But I just wanted to ask because we do have a few questions that have been sent in. Yeah,
I'm fine for time.
Okay. All right. So the first question is from Brian Stevens, who has got it. Let me bring it down here. It seems like he has said in the live chat, it's difficult for me to look at the live chat, listen to the guests, and do everything all at once. But I think he said that he's agnostic. So this is what he sent in a couple questions. This is his first question. Real and exorcist should not be put in the same sentence unless you say, quote, real harm has been caused by exorcists. There have been multiple cases of people dying.
Well, I don't know of a single case of somebody dying in an exorcism. So that would be my response. I've never encountered it, never heard of it. I don't know what else to say about that.
And it's not as if you don't talk with other exorcists. And so I'm sure that you would have heard of something if something like that would have happened.
We will have in an exorcism, if the person has any kind of medical distress, we have a physician in the room. We'll have a nurse in the room. The most important thing is the individual's care and health. The individual is a biological organism, and their biology has to be kept alive. So that is priority number one. The fact that they have a demon is always priority number two. Even if somebody has a demon, let's say, that doesn't mean in Christian theology, it doesn't mean that they are condemned to hell if they should suddenly die. It doesn't mean that. If it was a mortal sin, what Catholics call a mortal sin, that by which the demon entered, if they haven't repented of that mortal sin by the time of their death, well, that is damnation by definition. But even merely the fact that they have a demon, there could have already been a repentance of the sin, for example, and the demon remains because there has to be now a work to get out. God has deemed it necessary. He has decided that the mere repentance of the sin is not going to be exorcistic enough, that there has to be some other activity done on the part of the church. But by definition, given all of that, exorcism is secondary to the physical health of the person. So I've never seen somebody die. I've never heard of it.
He does have a follow-up. He says that, let me just read his next follow-up. He says, for those that are saying cope and suspects, check out a child who died 7 days ago in North Carolina. Also check out Annalise Michael, who died. Facts.
Right. So Annalise Michel was a German girl who was in a state of possession, who was possessed. But Annalise Michel's case is a different case, whereby her possession, it was willed by God for the purpose of containing the demons. It was not the exorcism itself that killed her. She died in the midst of a state of possession. But the individuals, the priests and so forth who were involved, they were never charged. She wasted away. Now, her case, I will say, is extraordinarily rare. There are cases of holy demoniacs. We have that in the history of the church among certain saints. So, for example, Saint Mary of Jesus Crucified, who was a Palestinian woman who lived in Bethlehem, was a nun there, a Carmelite nun. She was possessed through the will of God. Why? To contain and punish the demon. The demons that were in her didn't want to be in her, but they were restricted to being in her. And I say in her with quotations. Their activity was restricted to her, to a jurisdiction within her, so that their power to afflict others was limited. That is similar from what I've read in the case of Annalise Michel, but I will say this, there's so little published about her case, it's hard to know what has happened. But what I have seen is that there was nothing about the exorcism caused her death. Exorcism it consists of prayer ministry. That prayer ministry can't bring about somebody's death.
All right, moving on, we've got a question from Daman. He says, where could someone find the official comprehensive Catholic procedures or policies with respect to exorcists, appointing them, exorcisms, etc.?
Yeah, we don't typically publish that. The books exist. I have a copy of it right behind me on my bookcase. We don't publish it because it's intended for exorcists. It's not really intended for a public consumption, not because it's by its nature secret, but because it's something the church produces for exorcists. It's not something intended for public consumption. That being said, if you did digging around the internet, you're going to find all of that information relatively easily. So that's the best I can do for you. I can't point you to a book on Amazon or some other book in a bookseller, through some bookseller that you can obtain, that you can get. The books are published; they're obtained directly through the Vatican. One has to be an exorcist in order to obtain them.
All right, we've got 3 more questions, and then that will do it for us today. From Jesus. It's better to see both guests, you and Cameron and the priest. When you share only one screen, it feels like a video class. I'm totally okay with doing that. Actually, I do other things while I've got a guest speaking. I'll be looking at comments and managing the stream. So he says, my question, is it possible to devils to reach heaven?
For devils. So is it possible for demons to be saved? In other words, am I understanding that correctly?
I took him as saying, like, are demons going to actually like be in heaven? I don't know.
Absolutely not. So the fallen angels made a decision to rebel against God. And their decision was made with angelic intellects and wills, which are very different than human intellects and wills. When a human makes a decision, he can then come to a place where he has learned the error of his decision, and he thinks better of it. And then he changes his mind and makes the opposite decision. This is normal for human beings, because most decisions that we make with limited knowledge, and we may come into a place where our knowledge has been sufficiently increased that we see the need to revise our decision. When angels make a choice, they're doing so with the powerful and immense angelic intellect that exists outside space and time. They are incapable of changing their minds. So the decision they make is a decision made outside of space and time. That means it's an eternal decision. It's a decision they are making at every moment. And I'll give you an example. In the course of an exorcism, you will, at times, an exorcist will be pounding on a demon, so to speak, with the prayers. And at a certain point, the hold is breaking, and the possession is very close to ending, because his grip is now so weak that he knows that he's going to be cast into hell. And so sometimes you'll have a demon that will move in to try to make a deal. Okay, if you let me stay, I'll promise I won't afflict the person as badly as I ever did. Right? Of course, I'm not taking those terms like just get out, period. But you'll also find at times a demon that becomes emotional, so to speak, that starts wailing, starts crying, and starts, you can see the distress that when he leaves, when I leave, I'm going to experience horrific pain, and I don't want to, right? You can't imagine what it's like in hell. Like, okay, well, you know what? You don't have to return to hell. Just say to God right now that you repent of your rebellion against him, and he will accept. F you will be the immediate response. Their decision is eternal. And that strategy from the demon to try to evoke pity on him is exactly that, a strategy. And it's a strategy always based in deception. Even when a demon tells the truth, he's doing so only to deceive. And so that it just isn't something that an exorcist or anyone else for that matter ought to give any credence to, because you do so to your own peril.
All right, 2 more questions. This one's from Anglican Aesthetics. Okay, but what do you make of demons responding to Baptists or Anglican priests? That also happens, so is it evidence for Catholicism uniquely?
Yeah, no, and I said that in this show. Like, they don't only respond to Catholic priests. That absolutely. So the power, the Christian power, comes by virtue of one's baptism, and the Lord said, "In my name you will cast out demons." But at the same time, there is a universal understanding among the Christian peoples of the world that Catholicism has a success. When I say Catholicism, I also mean Orthodoxy. Right? The branches of Christianity that have and that share the ancient priesthood instituted by Christ, that those have a power and jurisdiction over the demons that no one else has. So we see this in our ministry. I see it in mine, where Christian denominations bring cases that are extraordinarily difficult, where the demon of the hold of the demon is not able to be broken by prayers that have been uttered by their congregational community, and so they're bringing them to the church for its ministry.
All right, last question for us today from Big Feet. Are other deities like Krishna or Zeus potentially demons, or angels mistaken for deities? Some people still believe in them.
You know, it's so ironic that this question is being asked of me. So last week, so I had, for half of the week, I performed exorcisms. And one of the demons, his name was Zeus. So was it the Zeus of Greek mythology? I don't know. If I were to ask the demon that, he might say yes. But you know, that kind of question, the demon doesn't have to answer that. And any answer he gives, I can't rely on it to be an honest answer. The only honesty I can compel, or any exorcist can compel out of a demon, relates to the circumstances of this particular case, of this victim that you're inhabiting. I can compel an honesty with regard to what is going to get him out. But insofar as his own biography and his own history, he can give any answer he wants, and I can't compel an honesty there, because it doesn't relate to the pastoral situation at hand. It doesn't relate to exorcism. We're entering into a different realm. So I never ask questions like that. It would be dangerous to start believing information that is unnecessary and gratuitous from the Prince of Lies.
And also, I think it kind of goes back in line with what you said earlier about being a skeptic as an exorcist is a big part of it. And it would make a lot of sense to be skeptical of someone who, right, as you say, is the king of lies. So,
and we will encounter periodically a demon. You know, I've encountered demons that identify themselves as Satan. Are you the Satan? Yes. Only God knows. We certainly do encounter demons that are higher in authority than others. Generally, the first demons that show themselves in a possession case, the person is inhabited by more than one. They're the lowest level, lowest ranking foot soldiers. And they'll be the ones being thrown out to take the initial punishment. And only when you've cast them out do you move on to other layers. In some cases have multiple layers. And so you're peeling those back before you can get to the one possessing spirit, the one that holds the rights. And you, as an exorcist, you're working your way towards that demon.
Do you mind? We did just have another question that was sent in. Do you mind taking that one, or?
Sure.
Okay. This one is from Are We Supposed To? And his question is, I'm not a skeptic, but I have been asked this question whenever I bring up these things to family or friends who are non-believers. Why are none of these events ever recorded either through audio or video? Thanks.
Yeah, a really, really good question. We don't record these events because of the dignity of the victim. So the demon he drives the victim to do. He's using the victim's body, and he does things with the body that is undignified, that is scandalous. So if you record those things, you make the victim subject to ridicule, and you're making the victim somebody who's already been preyed upon by the demon. You're now making them subject to be preyed upon by the general public. Because if you have a video, if you have a recording, then that recording, there's always a risk it could escape and be released in the public domain. There's always a risk that it could be subpoenaed by law enforcement for some reason. And so if you have a recording, now it's outside the church's power as to who's going to see that. So the church never authorizes and permits a recording of an exorcism. And, in the state of possession, the demon comes in and out of possession. He rescinds back into a kind of, let's call it a dormant state, such that the person's personality is able to come out again. The person is not conscious during an exorcism, and because that's what possession is. When a person is possessed, their consciousness has been shoved aside by the demon, and now he's in the driver's seat. So when somebody is in a state of possession, that victim, when he or she comes to, is not aware of what just happened. And that state of possession may have been for a few minutes, it may have been for hours, it may have been for days. And so that entire time is blocked out. Their consciousness was suppressed, and reality was not available to them. But the demon could at any point leave, and the individual finds himself doing something abhorrent, like eating human feces out of a toilet. And so you have to understand that the state of possession is a state of torture to the victim. And just like we wouldn't broadcast videos of people being tortured, being physically tortured, we don't want to do that when they're being spiritually tortured either.
Yeah, it's a kind of respect for the victim, right? And I've even heard of accounts of someone who did try to record, and then the video that they tried to watch the video again, and then it was blank. So I've heard stuff like that happening.
I have heard of it as well. I've never tried it. I don't plan to, but I have heard of that.
One question that I had that was related to something earlier that you were saying is the sort of hierarchy of demons. How do you know that one demon is like higher than another in the spectrum?
Well, two ways. One, because he comes later in the possession. He comes later. His identity is revealed. Now, when I say exorcism, most people think that an exorcism is a kind of one-time, one-shot thing, and it's not. Most possession cases require, on average, 75 exorcisms. So they require an exorcism done once a week for about a year and a half, 75-ish. That's the average. Some are much longer than that. Some are relatively quick. But the ones that last a while, that last a long time, those are the ones that typically have multiple possessing spirits. And the initial ones are always the lowest on the totem pole. They're the lowest because that's how the main demons, and especially the main possessor, saves his energy and protects himself from being cast out. The other way that one knows is just the sheer strength of that demon relative to the others. And typically, when you have a main possessor, it isn't even the fact that the initial demon is who the main possessor is, but there's an exchange of rights in the demonic kingdom. So it may have been a lower level demon that obtains access to the person. Those rights are given to a big guy, and that big guy, just his sheer power, his resistance, his character and nature is much more difficult to deal with than a lower level one. Often they will be mute spirits, like you hear about in the scriptures, where they don't talk. Nothing I can compel them nothing I can level at them will make them talk, because in their nature, they're not speakers. Just like in their nature, most demons I encounter, when the possession happens, their eyes roll into the back of their head. So for the next 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, the entire time of the exorcism, I just have two white eyes with no pupils at all staring at me. And yet the individual will know exactly what is in the room. And with an uncanny accuracy, the demon can reach out, if his arm is free, and grab somebody by the throat and start squeezing. So without eyes, they can see without any problem whatsoever.
My last question is related to what actually happens at the moment of deliverance. In my interview with Adam Bly, he said that I think his figure was 9 out of 10 victims see the Mother Mary. Has that been your experience as well? What happens at the moment of, final deliverance? What do they report seeing? What happens?
So I would not have that statistic. I wouldn't share that statistic with Adam. I think it depends. When Adam Bly is involved, he's involved with an exorcist, because Adam is a layperson. He's not an exorcist per se. He's immensely talented and helps exorcists. He's helped train them, but he's not the one issuing the commands. So Adam is with a certain individual or with certain individuals when that's happening. And that might be the phenomena that occurs with them. And it's not to say the same phenomena occurs with every exorcist. I certainly have the victim at the moment of liberation sometimes see the Blessed Mother, sometimes see a saint or see Jesus. Sometimes they don't see anything. But what you see is an immediate difference in the eyes, that you see the person. And that's the best way I can describe it. Throughout an exorcism, I'm looking into the eyes of the victim. I'm looking at something that is inhabiting them, that has a definite personality. When that personality leaves, it's unmistakable. You can see that. The eyes are the window into the soul. And so I'm seeing the individual now. I'm seeing this person. Oftentimes what I see is that there's a brightness coming from their person, almost like a glow coming from their flesh, that the light of Christ is now in them, and it hasn't been in them for a long time. So I see more of those kinds of phenomena, those kinds of facts happening.
Now, is there anything that you would like to leave with the audience? Anything that we haven't discussed that you'd like to mention before we close out the show?
Yeah, I would just like to say, which I've already said. I said it in the midst of my own conversion story, but also in the exhortation I've already given. I just want to reemphasize that exhortation. If you don't believe in God, if he's not a reality for you, ask him to make him that reality. Because if he does exist, he is quite capable of God making himself known to you. So stop searching for evidence of him and ask him. Or I mean, you don't have to stop searching for evidence, but more than that, make a dialogue with him your focus, because that is what is going to be much more effective at giving you what you desire and what you were created to have.
Well, Father Martins, it's been great to have you on the show, and I was really pleased to hear in detail your conversion story. Is this the first time that you've actually been able to air your story in such detail?
No, I've told it before.
Yeah, it's just unfortunate that I basically live on YouTube, so anytime I like interview a new guest or anything, I'm like looking for things on YouTube for them instead of, searching for, well, it does happen, but not every guest that I interview has, a litany of books that they've written or anything like that. But in any case, it's been great to have you on the show, and I just appreciate everything that you shared with us. And
thank you so much.
Most of the exorcists and, even Adam and everything, they say that the reason why they come on and do these sorts of things is to help people, to really help those that, basically to kind of warn people to stay away from this stuff and stay away from it, because it's not a matter of just like randomly someone winds up possessed. In most cases, it's normally that they've invited something in. And so this serves this show and others, they serve as a sort of warning and a sort of caution for people to avoid this kind of thing, because it is real and it's very dangerous.
Absolutely.
So
I would concur with what they say.
Well, again, I appreciate you coming on. I thank you guys for watching. As always, let me know what you think about this show in the comments. Let me know if you'd like to have Father Martins back on the show to discuss anything. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next Capturing Christianity episode. See you guys later. Hey, it's me again. Actually, don't leave yet. I've got something super, super important to tell you. So first of all, you're awesome. Like you just watched a really, really long video just now, and you're still watching it. That is actually pretty amazing. Secondly, we have hundreds, literally hundreds of other apologetics related videos for you to watch on our channel. Go check them out. I've interviewed exorcists, hosted debates between Christians and atheists. I've even made response videos to atheists. All of that is available on our channel. Go check it out. Third, I rely on people that see value in my work, people like you that watch videos to the very end, to keep the lights on around here. Literally, this is how I feed my family. So if you see value in the work that I do, please consider supporting this ministry and becoming a patron. Links to that are in the description. Oh, and have I mentioned that Christianity is true?